Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Y'all, welcome to continue eating. Welcome to continue doing. They're going to be walking around with trash bags. If you have trash, they'll try to do it quietly. This group is the Rise Up Sister group, and we have 3 ladies up here, Miss Jeana Delfin, Miss Carrie Falgout, and Miss Sandy Verrett. And we're going to just discuss things that they've been through, difficult seasons in their life, okay? So, okay, we're going to start like this. Yes, they have powerful stories. I already know their stories, but y'all are going to be amazed at what they've walked through. So each of them is going to tell us one of their, I know when we go through life, everybody has difficult moments, and for them to even say what was their most difficult, they've walked through a lot. So they're just going to talk about a difficult time. So Sandy, would you like to start with us and tell us about what you went through and what's your difficult time that you're going to be speaking about today?
Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about infertility and disappointment and just expectations. So my husband and I, we were married. We are married for 10 years, but we were about 2 years in. We were ready to start our family, and then we realized it was going to take longer than expected. So started going to a fertility doctor. We did IUIs, we did IVF, and we had some embryos from that IVF. And every time we did an IVF transfer, like, it just didn't work out.
Right.
So it was a really like a emotional roller coaster, because it was like good news and bad news, good news and bad news.
Plus all the medication they're giving you to try to make everything work.
Right. Plus the medication, and then it was really sad too at the time, because I didn't tell anybody. I kept it to myself, like during our IUIs, and then once we started doing IVF, then I started opening more. I didn't know it then, but it really was the enemy just trying to keep me in shame and isolation.
Right.
But so that is, I mean, I wish I could go back, and I wish I would have, reached out more. So, but I didn't, So it was very difficult just going through that, me and my husband alone. And then whenever we got that bad news, it was just even harder, because we really didn't have that much support, and really didn't have support at church either, because the church that we were going to, they really didn't know what to do.
Right.
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 So we were in a tough spot. So anyway, during our last IVF transfer, we had one embryo left, and we did genetic testing. We found out, our embryo was fine, like everything was normal, great results with everything. We also found out the gender, and that he was a boy, and so that was exciting. So like once I found out the gender, you start
imagining
dreaming.
everything, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, nursery, I'm gonna be raising a son, like all these hopes and dreams.
Right.
So during that last IVF cycle, we did pray for God's will, because we know, like with IVF, it's not 100% success rate.
Right.
It's like less than 50%. So we knew that it might not work out, but we did pray for God's will. So, which we didn't for any of the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
We just
did it right.
Yeah. So anyway, we did that transfer. And we did not get to bring him home. So he would have been 5 years old in August last month.
Yeah.
So since that time, it'll be 7 years since that last IVF cycle. And God's been so good.
Right.
So I know we're talking about some hard stuff, but we're going to talk about some good stuff.
So she's going to share some more of her story through some more questions, but that's what Sandy will be sharing with us today. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie, you want to give us a glimpse?
Yeah. So my most difficult moment in my life came about 7 years ago. This was kind of just before I was walking with the Lord. But 7 years ago, I was probably about 2 years out of high school. I just completed like my first year of college, and I was struggling with a lot of just anxiousness and having my identity rooted in the world and in culture, and coming to the realization that I don't really know who I am. And so I got caught up in this place of comparing myself, that I was feeling inadequate in everything that I was going to pursue in life, because all my peers that I had went to school with, they were moving on to these bigger things. They were moving on to getting like their doctorates and their bachelors and all these other things. And I was so scared in investing 4 years of myself into something new that it wouldn't fulfill me. And so I dropped out, and after that anxiousness, it kind of became just kind of a breeding ground for shame.
Right.
And I didn't know it at the time, but the enemy was using that area and just would kind of prick and pry at just feeding me thoughts about my worth and how I'm never gonna amount to anything. My parents, my family must think that I'm this failure. And so this started progressing over time from just these little thoughts here and there. And I think this is why it's so important, even as believers, to take our thoughts captive. Because what happened in my life was that those small spurts of anxiousness eventually started turning into more severe anxiety attacks. And what would take place in those attacks is I would start kind of just hyperventilating. I felt like my lungs were gonna collapse. I would have these huge splotches of hives all over my body that I didn't know how to explain in my workplace. And eventually, all that overthinking was exhausting me. It started taking me out of things that I was passionate about, like exercising and just being involved with people. I didn't have the social or the physical capacity to take care of myself anymore. And eventually that grew into a darker place where I started considering what the world would be like if I wasn't here. And so eventually I started kind of coming up with these different ways that I could painlessly and quickly end my life. And I was faced with the very real reality one night in a moment on my bathroom floor where I broke down and I was about to proceed with a plan. So to summarize all of that, my difficult moment is about anxiety and suicidal ideation.
Right. Jeana, you ready?
Sorry if I cry. This is a hard one for me.
This is the first time lots of these people are sharing this story in public. So.
Yeah. So this is about a season that happened in my childhood that I've been really struggling with recently and finding some healing. My father was violently abusive to my mother and myself, and oftentimes she would put herself in between my dad and I and take the beating. I was left thinking she was my hero on one hand, but the other hand, I would wonder why she never left him and let me still be there, dealing with that. And that one I just kind of let go as I, went about my life, but didn't realize it was still there. At 17, my dad had an affair and left my mom, and so we were finished with the daily trauma, but I was still really broken and didn't realize until actually putting this together this past week how I coped with that. And I found out some interesting things about myself just in this past week. God is very good. 2 years ago on New Year's Day, my dad chose to put a gun to his head and end his life in a very public way. That was also traumatic. And right after that, we were able to, my husband and I took freedom for the first time. And I thought that I would be dealing with that loss and the feelings that I had, but what I found out was I had some pretty toxic feelings towards my mom for keeping me in that situation.
Right.
And freedom was able to help me work through that a lot. So I was able to put some of that to rest with the help of my wonderful teacher, Virginia. Thank you. It was a blessing. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Okay. So these are very deep and very fresh for them also, so just give them a chance. So we'll go back to Sandy. Sandy, how has your faith in God sustained you during your journey and with infertility? And what scriptures or prayers have become your anchor through these tough moments?
Yeah, so 2 Corinthians 5:7, for we walk by faith, not by sight. That was like my anchor throughout everything.
Right.
It was really difficult to walk that out, because when we see everything, right? Like, we see the diagnosis, we see things not working out. It's very hard in the natural to see the impossible, to see the possible. And I
as
remember,
you're working it out,
right?
All your friends and family are having the blessing that you're longing
yes,
for.
there's so many different dynamics. So during our fertility treatment, this was before I was saved, but I didn't know God.
Okay.
Very big difference, right?
Right.
So one day we were going to a conference in Houston, and we were at Lakewood Church, and I remember we went in there and I prayed, and I was like, God, like, I just need a word. I just need something, a message, like something that I could take home with me. Nothing specific, just something that I can take home with me. I was really desperate. I didn't tell my husband what I prayed. I'm just to myself, to him. So I prayed this prayer, and then worship starts. Worship's great, and then the worship leader, she gets on the mic and she starts sharing her infertility journey.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, wow. That was the first time I heard anybody ever speak about fertility, anything.
In public
In public, church, anything. That was my very, I didn't even think people talked about it.
Wow.
So to hear that, then I was crying. Like, I was like, Darren was looking at me like, are you all right? I'm like, I couldn't even say anything.
Right.
So she starts sharing her story, and then she prays for anybody who's struggling. And then Joel Osteen comes on, starts the message. His whole message is about fertility.
Wow.
About birthing something in you through pain.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, God loves me. That was the first time I've ever experienced his love.
Right.
I've never felt that before.
Is that amazing? Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, that was the very first time. And I was like, I didn't know him this was like literally my first experience. So I was like, it gave me so much fire
yeah.
that I would need later to sustain.
Yeah.
But like, that was my start of, okay, he loves me. Like, I can do this.
Right.
We can do this.
Right.
And so, walking by faith. At that time, I did not have a lot of faith, but he used what I had, and I think that's so important for us to know, is that we don't have to have this big old faith right now. Like, he will use whatever you
Mustard
have right
seed.
now. Right, and it's enough.
Right.
It's enough. We don't. It may grow later, and that's fine. And it's all throughout the Bible. He cares about what faith we have at that time, and he did that for me. And so that scripture has always been my anchor throughout the journey.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, Carrie, what emotions led you to that point, and can you describe the moment when you first encountered God's voice and how it changed your perspective?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I had a lot of anxiousness, and I got to the point where I was having these severe anxiety attacks, and so it got to where every single day of my life felt like I was experiencing an anxiety attack, at least to some extent.
Right.
So every day I was coming home from work depleted, I was exhausted, and I had friends reaching out to me wanting to get together, and I'm just not into it. I don't want anything to do with anything. I just want to sleep. And I want to say even around this time, my mom's in here. I want to say even around this time, my mom was concerned, and she's like, do you think you need to go to a doctor? Because all you do is sleep. And
your answer was probably, no, I got this.
No, I'm fine. I got this. I sleep all the time. That's just what I do. So I had this moment one night I was in my bedroom and I was folding my laundry. And now imagine I'm like 19, 20 years old. And I'm just kind of like feeling such a peace over my heart. And I'm like, oh man, like today was just such a good day. I haven't had a day like this in so long that I didn't feel like my mind was attacking me. I didn't feel like I was going to lose my breath.
Wow.
And so I'm like, man, I'm just so grateful. And in like 2 seconds, maybe, like a switch, my mind started just spiraling. And I could tell the difference between the voices I was hearing and my internal dialogue, because the things that I was hearing were the most hateful and disgusting and the most shameful things I'd ever said to myself, but it wasn't my heart. And I even recognized in that moment, I recognized that this isn't me, but I don't know what it is.
Wow.
And
what do I do with it? I'm 19, right?
19, yeah. And I recognize this distinction, and I'm just like on the floor. I'm spiraling. I feel the weight of the world just fall on me. I'm on the bathroom floor crying hysterically, and a voice comes to my mind and is like, okay, stop playing around. You've come up with at least 5 different ways to end your life. It's time to just pick one and go.
Wow.
You're being too indecisive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I lost it, because at this point I've considered suicide so many times. It wasn't even really that I was concerned about myself. My first thought was, what's going to go through my family's mind when they find me here?
Wow.
When they find me and wonder what's been going on and why I didn't talk to anybody about it. And it crushed me, because I'm like, I don't even know how I'm going to bring myself to talk about this. And so as I'm processing what I just heard and the emotions that I have, what's blocking me from doing this, I hear a different voice. I mean, it still sounds like me. It's my it's my
right.
But it's a different tone. And the words that I hear is, if you end your life today, you won't be in heaven tomorrow.
Wow.
And when I tell you, it's like I completely snapped out of it. I'm like, what? And I'm like, is this true? And I didn't have a relationship with God, but just to kind of brief you, like my background is Catholic. We weren't super involved in the church growing up, and so I always knew what people said about God, and there were people who had a relationship with God. So if you would have asked me, I'd say, yeah, I'm a believer, I know God, but
But
I
it was
didn't.
more religion over a relationship.
It was religion
right.
over relationship. And so I found myself in that moment just kind of panicking, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to spend my eternity in hell, but I really don't know where I'm going to spend eternity. And so I pull out my phone and I start Googling, like, if I kill myself, am I going to hell? Like,
Right,
that's the only thing I can think
Right.
to do. And so I couldn't find a straightforward answer, of course.
Because you probably got every answer.
Because there's
Right,
all kinds of answers. And so at that point, I just stopped and I said, God, if you're real and you're really a God of relationships, and I mean, I'm breaking down. I'm like, you have got to make these voices stop, because I will end my life tonight.
Wow.
If they don't stop, or I'll wait for you today to move. But if tomorrow, if I'm back in this, I can't promise you I'm going to stay.
Right.
I can't do it anymore. And I made him this promise, and I said, God, if you do this for me, I will turn my life to you. I will serve you. I will go to church. I'll do whatever you want me to do.
Right. Yeah.
Hold the applause. That didn't come till 5 years later.
But it was a start. It was a start. Right.
It was a start. It was a
Right.
start. And so I went to bed, because, I'm coming down from that whole anxiety thing. And I'm exhausted. So I'm like, I can't even think anymore. I'm just going to put myself to bed. So I go to sleep. And it wasn't until a week later that I realized that I had peace. Like God never allowed me to experience a single suicidal thought or moment of anxiousness ever again, and I'm so grateful. And also to add
But they
to
were so
that,
common to you, you didn't recognize it.
I didn't recognize it anymore. And don't get me wrong, I've had experiences with anxiety still. Like, there's still things that make me really nervous, but I've never had an attack like that. I've never felt like I was going to be on the floor dying in 2 seconds. I've never broken out in such horrendous patches of hives again. But also, I did want to give this disclaimer, to any of us in here, because it happens. If you lost a loved one to suicide, my heart is really for you. And I just want to remind you, if this stirred up any concern in your heart about what the Lord spoke to me in my moment, we truly don't know what their final moments were with God whenever they went through with that. And so there could have been a moment of repentance in their heart with the Lord before they had that moment. Right. But I know that for me, the Lord knew to speak to me the way that he did, because I did not have a moment of repentance in my heart. Up until that point, I thought I was going to heaven because I thought I was a good person. Right. I didn't leave that in the hands of the Lord to decide for me. I assumed that because of the life that I live. And so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The Lord moves.
So I think lots of people, too, they're like, well, how do you know if the God's speaking to you? But you're going to know without a doubt. Like, it was still your mind and but you knew without a doubt it was God speaking to me. And I tell that to people all the time.
It's so true.
When he speaks, and you feel like it's audible when it wasn't, but you just, there's no doubt when it's his voice.
And I find myself now struggling with, I don't know if I'm hearing me or if I'm hearing God. And then I think back to that moment and I'm like, there's a difference in tone.
Right.
You can tell.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, Jeana, what steps did you take in your journey towards emotional healing, and how did you experience God's grace and healing power in your life?
Well, the first step was definitely freedom, peeling back those onion layers like Pastor Chad talks about.
Right.
It's so true. With each step of peeling it back, though, I realized that there was way too much there for me to process collectively, so I had to start compartmentalizing everything.
Exactly.
I had to put my mom in a box and my dad in a box and me in a box and figure out, which emotions were which, and I had to start labeling them and processing them one by one, and it was hard. It was really, really hard.
Right.
Especially when I got to my mom's box, because I couldn't separate just what I went through. I had to go deeper and realize, and this was the Lord showing this to me, I have no doubt, that my mom just wasn't the mom who birthed me and the life that went forward. She had a past. And her past was being raped by 3 of her uncles. Her past was being raised in an alcoholic home. Her past was having the police knock at her door because her family members were being taken in and out of jail. She didn't want to take me and my sister and leave my father and go to that. So she stayed with my dad. She stayed in a home that was nice, with nice cars and a good paycheck. She chose to stay there rather than take us to a place.
I think lots of times as parents, we don't realize all the baggage that we bring into something, and in her mind, she probably thought, this is better than what I went through.
Exactly.
And she thought she was maybe doing something right.
I'm sure that's what she thought.
Right.
She didn't even make it through high school, and she had no way to support us, and so that was something that was a revelation for me. I had to really stop and mull that over, and then the compassion that I felt for her in that moment was, overwhelming.
Right.
It was life-changing to be able to think about those things. My dad, I was able to just deal with it because now he was gone and he couldn't hurt me anymore, and that was kind of easy for me, actually. But then I had to get to my box, and
right.
that was the hardest of all.
Exactly.
And my box was the fact that my parents divorced at 17, and after that, he had no influence in my life. But at age 20, at age 30, I was still blaming him for everything that I did wrong, every bad decision in my life, because he shaped me.
Right.
it made me
That's the filter you had for life, right?
exactly.
Right.
And I had to realize that I wasn't a victim of him anymore. I was a victim of my own choices and what I did with how I was raised. And then I had to go back and relive choices that I had made and people that I had hurt, and that wasn't easy.
Right.
So God cracked that one open and really, really showed me, and I just had to spend a lot of time on my face for that one.
Right.
So those were my steps.
Yeah. And she mentioned that. We talk about that a lot when you go through freedom or a small group. You know, God can only reveal so much to you at a time. So it's a little bit of healing at every time. And, you know, we just can take a little bit at a time and we heal that little layer, and then we take the next little layer and heal that. And I think we all have something to heal until we have no more breath. You know, like we'll
and
just
not be
always
afraid.
have something. Right.
No, you can't be afraid of
Right.
what's going to come after each layer.
Right. Because the healing that comes with each layer is so much better
Yes.
than not peeling it, you know.
Absolutely.
Okay, Sandy, what have you learned about trusting God and his timing?
Yeah, so that was something that I struggled with, trusting God's timing. And when I first started opening up about my journey very early, a lot of people just gave me advice, and it wasn't great advice. Just relax. Okay, well, you don't tell anybody with a medical diagnosis to relax. Like, don't work like that.
Yeah.
Or trusting God's timing was another one that it's not great.
It's so much easier to say to somebody than to actually live it out.
Right, 100%. So trusting in God's timing was not great advice for me because I can't trust somebody I don't know.
Right.
So I had to, when somebody told me that, it was hurtful because I was like, well, why would God do this? Like, I'm grieving, I'm hurt, but you're suggesting to trust in God's timing, but
Ultimately, he can fix this.
Right.
Right.
So it was confusing for me, and then because you find out things way later.
Right,
God gives you
right.
revelation. So for me it was because I didn't know him.
Right.
I didn't know him, and to trust him, you have to know him. So to trust him, I had to build my relationship, and that's with any relationship. When you trust somebody, you have to build a relationship. You have to build rapport with that person.
Right.
You have to have that relationship in order to trust them.
Right.
And that's something I didn't have, so that that advice was confusing for me.
Right.
I didn't even know what God's timing meant. So until I started to know him, knowing his character,
Right.
what the Bible says about timing,
Right.
and knowing God's heart,
Right.
then I can understand his timing.
Right.
Then I can understand that his timing is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have our plans, we have our to-do list, we think this is going to happen next week, next year, whatever, but it doesn't work like that.
No.
But the difference is that we have to know our Creator. If we don't know our Creator, then our timelines are going to be off.
I think that's huge because lots of times as Christians, we want to tell people, either grief or miscarriage or suicide, anything that we've never really dealt with,
Mm-hmm.
that they're asking our opinion for. We just need to point them to Jesus.
Right,
Because
exactly. Yep.
most of us, I know some of y'all might be trained, but most of us are not professionally trained on how to handle
Right.
that or even know what to say to people in those positions. And instead of saying something that is
Yeah.
hurtful and doesn't make sense to them, we do just need to point them to Jesus every
right.
time.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's like, let's just go to the source, right?
Right.
Let's just go to the source. I don't know what you've been through, girl, but look, I know
Right.
the one. He's the source. He's our provider. Like, let me point you to him.
Right.
And then
Because
we can
he's the
go
only
from
one
there.
that can do it too. So
That's
let's
right.
just bring you there. I'll help you walk there. But
Yeah.
that's where you need to be,
Right.
in his presence, in his,
Exactly.
word.
So I
and-
heard this story recently at a conference by Alicia Kearns shared their story, And it's such a beautiful picture of God's timing and trusting God. So there was this pastor on a plane, and not just the pastor, it was other people. It was a bunch of people on the plane. But they were going somewheres, and they started having like turbulence, and it was just a really rocky ride. And so, but there was this little girl in the seat, and the little girl was just like playing with her dolls. She was
not
just
worried about it.
cool as a cucumber. And so the pastor's looking at her like, while everybody else is freaking out. Everybody's just like, well, like, what's going on? And this little girl is calm as a cucumber, like she's playing with her dolls. So the pastor was like, I gotta talk to this little girl. Like, I gotta see why she was so calm. So he talks to the little girl. He says, why were you so calm going through all of that? And she said, well, my dad's the pilot.
She had full trust in him, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's us.
Right.
Like, we're on the plane. God's the pilot.
Exactly.
We don't know where we're going
Right,
sometimes.
right.
We don't know what kind of storms we're going to be in.
And there's going to be turbulence.
There's going to be turbulence.
Everybody's plane's going to have turbulence,
But
right?
the difference is that she trusted her dad
Right.
to get her to her
The
destination.
right,
you know?
right. That's cool.
And
That's awesome. Yeah.
that is like the perfect picture of, to me, like trusting God and his timing.
Yeah, and rest in it, right?
Yeah, and
right,
rest in it, and
Right.
actually have joy in it.
Right.
You know, actually have joy, because there's peace knowing who the Father
Right,
is.
exactly. That's awesome. Okay, Jeana, how have you been able to forgive, and what advice would you give others struggling with forgiveness in similar situations?
Well, I was able to forgive after putting all my emotions through a sieve and labeling everything and, calling them out and naming them one by one, like that song that we
Right.
sang as kids. My dad's death, like I said, was easy. I think the hard one was my mom's, because she's so fragile. She's got cardiac issues. She's emotionally fragile, and she's been so sick.
Just recently, she's been sick. The last year has been a
Yes,
lot on her, right?
Very, very much so.
Right.
And my sister and I didn't think that she could handle me talking to her about this. We were very concerned that it would do some damage to her. So I was left with processing that and trying to figure out how I could, go through the steps that we're supposed to get. Talk to the person, ask
Right.
all those things. And I will tell you that since I couldn't do that, I talked to my girlfriends. It's so important to have good friends.
Right. Connections, right.
So important.
Right.
So I called them up and said, this is what I'm going through. And, I told them the story, and she said, well, have you really forgiven your mama? And I was like, wow. Okay, so let's revisit all those things all over again. And I just talked it out and was able to process a lot.
Right.
It's so important to have people that you can walk through the fire with.
Exactly.
And I'm so blessed that I have that.
Yeah.
So blessed.
Yeah. So you've forgiven your mom.
Yep.
Forgiven your dad.
Yep.
But it was a process. It wasn't
Yes.
just okay, I'm forgiven and done. It was deep.
The only person I haven't forgiven so far is myself.
Self. Yeah.
And that's going to take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Carrie, I know you didn't serve him immediately after that supernatural moment, but how has your relationship with him evolved now that you're connected to the church and other believers?
Okay, yeah, so I told you that I didn't start living and serving for him until 5 years later. It's true. I didn't serve him immediately. I went on just kind of living life as I knew it. I acknowledged that God moved in my life. I told him thank you, but I didn't really know what to do with that movement, and I just continued falling back on the pattern that I knew, which was like trying to find my identity in other people or trying to find it in the world. And so I would join groups like with Mardi Gras and get stuck partying and do all the things. I'd look for it in relationships. I couldn't find it there. But still, even in that struggling to find my identity, again, I experienced anxiousness, but I never had those attacks
Not
or
the
anything like that
same.
ever again. So that was back in like 2017. I have notes from 2019. I actually met Heidi Blanchard here. I don't know if she's in here right now.
I think she's in the other group with Caston. Yeah.
I met her at my place of work, and I also met Sandy there too. And Heidi had brought me, she invited me to a sermon here. I remember I have notes on it. What was preached on it, I don't know.
But your notes.
But even then, you know, I didn't give my heart to God then, but He was planting seeds. And so
Right.
throughout that span of time in these 5 years, God continued to send me people in my life. I remember Sandy was such a light in the workplace, and just planting those seeds of encouragement and love, and just showing me what it's like to truly love people. And God has just been so faithful and just leading me that direction, until one day I felt myself growing, just that lack, like just feeling that lacking, and just like I just wasn't fulfilled. I was missing something, and I was getting depressed, and my mind instantly went to, well, oh my gosh, I don't want to start experiencing what I came
Where
from.
I was, right.
So I ended up coming to church on my own and making relationships. I started here. I don't even think I told Heidi that I started coming here. She just started seeing me one day, and I hopped into a small group in the first season that it was open. I took Freedom with Miss Renee Scott, and she's a wonderful leader.
Exactly.
And I started making connections with the women here in church, and just so many women in this room, even just. Y'all are like family to me.
Right.
It's become like a family to me, and each person in that I've experienced with, that I've crossed paths with, has helped me to evolve my relationship, because I was able to start recognizing that there are depths to a relationship with God, like with other people. It's
Right.
not just you give your life to God and that's it.
It's over,
like this
right,
is
right,
it. I'm just expected to live this happy life, and so. Through those relationships, God has become more than just my God. He's become, you know, my Father. He's become my comforter. He's become my best friend. I know today that when I struggle, the first thing I want to do is go cry to Him in the closet. I just want Him involved in every moment of my life now.
Right.
I don't want Him to be that second resort anymore.
Right. That's awesome. Okay, Jeana, it's difficult to see anything positive in the moment of pain, but now that you can look back, were there any blessings in the midst of your pain?
That's really hard, but actually, yes. I've thought about that recently with all of this is going to seem like a rabbit hole, but with all the sex trafficking stuff that's
Right.
around right now, one of the things that I would do as a coping mechanism as a teenager is I would steal the Sunday classifieds from my dad's paper. And I would read those ads, and there's help wanted ads and garage sale ads, but there was something back in the day called the personal section, personal
Right.
ads, you know, which is where that song, if you have pina coladas, you know, that's where that came from, right? Long walks on the beach and all that kind of stuff. Well, there was column after column of ads, you know, saying, you know, wanting a girl or a man
Right,
wanting a woman, whatever. And I would read those, and I'd circle the ones that I wanted to call, because I thought that was going to make me be able to escape from what I was
get
going
out.
through.
Right.
It was my out. And you know, we didn't have cell phones in our bedrooms that we could pick up and call. We just had phones on the wall with a long stretchy cord. If it was long enough, you were lucky that you can go in the closet and shut
To
the
get it
door
to-
where nobody
right.
could hear what you were
Right.
saying. But I couldn't just go into the kitchen and pick up that phone without somebody hearing what I had to say. And every time I tried to make that call, every time I got brave enough to go and place one of those phone calls,
It was your mom and dad.
somebody was there
Right.
to catch me, you know.
Right.
And I realized that the Lord showed me, thinking about that recently, that He spared me from that.
That's huge.
That's a huge blessing, because
Right.
I wanted it. I desperately wanted to go, because one of the things that I developed as a coping mechanism, I was brave.
Right.
I had to be brave.
You had to be.
I
Right.
had to be brave so that my sister wouldn't get beat. I had to be the one.
Right.
I had to stand up. And so because of that, I was willing to go
Right.
and do something really stupid. But the hand of God stayed me from doing that.
That's amazing.
And
huge.
that's the blessing. That's
Yeah.
a big blessing.
Silver lining in all the pain. Right,
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Sandy, what advice would you give to women who are struggling to trust God in their difficult seasons that they're going through right now?
Yeah. So, well, before that, I just gotta say, like, I remember us like talking about all of this, and it's just so like I just love you so much. I'm just so proud of you, and like it's just like full circle. Like just God,
Right.
God is so
Right.
good. He is so good.
Yes.
Like
yes.
just so thankful. So I love you.
Yes. Yes.
Advice to give, going through difficult seasons and disappointments. So, these are like the four C's for me. I like acronyms.
Okay.
I like acronyms. Community is so important.
Right.
Having someone, it's even better, like if you can find someone who's been through what you've been through. And if you can't find anybody, then just pray, talk to God, and say, God, send me someone that I can lean on,
Right.
that can be a mentor to me, so that you can have somebody to lean on in those tough moments who's been there. So that would be community, or even starting a small group. Just somebody that you can lean on, be with. Community, care is another one, to give yourself grace and to physically take care of yourself.
Right.
Spiritually take care of yourself, mentally, emotionally. Like, you have to take care of yourself when going through difficult things, because that gets put on the back burner a lot. And I know there's probably a lot of us who think that we're the strong one.
Right.
Like a lot of people might come to us for things, and you might put yourself on the back burner a little bit. And that was something that I did often. I remember I would get bad news, and I was just in grief, and I was like literally crying, and then I had to go into a meeting, and I would have to shut everything down.
Right.
And I had to put on this mask and pretend that everything was okay. And that's the worst thing I could have ever done.
Right.
I should have taken time for myself,
Right.
to grieve that and to have that moment, instead of just jumping into that next thing.
Right. Right.
And so it's very important to take care of your mental health, spiritual health, all the things, so that you're healthy. So that's care. And then the next one is to continue. So when you're going through difficult things, especially something like that affects like your identity, or it can affect your identity, like infertility. I remember there was many times that I thought I wasn't good enough.
Right.
And the enemy will try his hardest to plant those seeds in your mind that you're not good enough.
Right.
And so to continue while you're going through something, it means that you have purpose right now.
Right.
While you're going through something, like you don't just stop life.
I'm going to tell you right now.
Mm-hmm.
So you were going through all that. She was going through all that, but you were a light in her life during her darkest time. So even when you're going through all your difficulties, you're going to still be a light in somebody else's life. And we're all here to do it together,
Right.
and
Yes.
So good.
you don't, you
So
don't
good.
see it, but right now on this
So
stage,
true.
Right. That's
Yeah.
and that's so true. And we have to help each other.
right,
Like
right.
we all just have the same goal.
Right,
We all
exactly.
just have the same goal, so we
Exactly.
have to help each other. But yeah, just continue on. Like, God has a plan and a purpose
Right.
for you, and to be fruitful and multiply is like right now.
Right.
Like it's not it's right now. Like we have fruit that we need to bear.
Right.
We have people that we need to go see
Right,
and talk
exactly.
to. Like we have things to do.
We have things to do, right.
So while you're waiting for something, while we wait for things, like we could do it well, you know?
Right,
Like what,
right.
God, what do you have for me right now?
Right.
What do you need me to do right now?
Right.
I know it's dark, it might be cloudy, but you're the light, you're the lamp to my feet. Where do you need me to go in this next step?
Where are you sending me? Right.
Yeah, just send me, because you
Right.
can be both and, you know, it's okay
Right.
to be disappointed at the same time and experience God's love
Right.
and joy and the purpose that He has for
Exactly.
you.
So
So
we're running out of time.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. So I just want y'all to know that I know all of y'all have a story. All of y'all have multiple stories. These are 3 that shared with you today that have overcome and are overcoming. But the enemy has come to kill, steal, and destroy. And he wanted to take each one of these out at a different time. And I'm so glad that he didn't, that he did not win, that God won, and that we're all serving God, and we're all trying to help others in their moment too. So don't do life alone. Get in a small group. We just started freedom groups, any other groups. Talk to them. They'll help you get in groups. Come talk to me. I'll help you get in a group. But make some connections. Get people in your life that you can talk to and tell your deepest secrets, because God gave us others to heal each other, you know, so we need to speak it to someone so that we can heal it. So that's the end of this session right now. We're going to take a little break for everyone to go to the bathroom, get some water, whatever you need, and then we'll come back in here for the next breakout sessions are 3 different areas. But please don't go into the family ministry building if that's going to be your next breakout session until make sure they're wrapped up first, okay? Thank y'all.